Hello and welcome to Banfield. We are a nation of laws, and nowhere is that more apparent than in the ultimate political wedge issue, by which I mean abortion. Roe v. Wade and later decisions put up some guardrails for state-imposed restrictions. But if those guardrails disappear in the next weeks, it seems highly likely that abortion access will depend almost entirely on where you live. And your ability to travel to get an abortion, well, that could be curtailed as well. Already, traveling to the Supreme Court itself has become far more difficult because in light of that leaked draft decision declaring Roe null and void, the court did this. Yes, people, that is your court, and that is an 8-foot-high fence that was put up, and also some dump trucks were stationed as well to block the street from vehicle traffic. And it's maybe no surprise, because as many as 28 states, all the ones that you see here in red, are poised to either ban abortion outright or restrict it severely, in some cases amounting to a virtual ban. And clearly it's made some people very angry, others not so much. But how do we know? 13 of those states, by the way, the ones you see now, they are very eager to crack down. So they passed so-called trigger laws, which would ban the abortion the instant or very soon after Roe is overturned, likely this summer. Safe havens post-Roe are these states that are in green, where abortion rights are either specifically protected or at least not restricted beyond the limits set by Roe. A few states actually have a right to abortion in their constitutions, Florida and Michigan among them. But those states aren't on this map because the lawmakers there passed some tough anti-abortion laws anyway. And I know what you're thinking. Probably Congress could do something, right? If they wanted to, they could give the nation one big abortion law that's the standard for everybody. And you are right about that. Senate Democrats, in fact, are thinking the same thing at this point. Today, Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, announced a vote for next Wednesday on a measure that would codify the abortion rights of everybody from Maine all the way to Hawaii. And it has zero chance of clearing that 60-vote threshold that it needs to survive. It might well not even get all 50 Democratic votes either. So we're back to the legal patchwork. And two very smart people are here to help me navigate it, or maybe more aptly put, to help you navigate it, because wherever you live, you're going to have to do some research. Melody Schreiber is a political reporter who has covered this mess for The Guardian. David Cohen is a law professor at Drexel University, and he's the co-author of Obstacle Course, The Everyday Struggle to Get an Abortion in America. Okay, so David, I'd like to start with you. Is it too simplistic to just suggest that any of the states that effectively permitted, gradations of abortion will continue to do that after this likely ban on Roe takes place in the summer, and that those who banned it or had stricter bans are going to get even tougher? Is that just too simplistic?
There's a lot of truth to what you say. The states that have relaxed restrictions on abortion will stay that way. The states that have a lot of restrictions on abortion, they are either going to increase the restrictions or ban it entirely. There's going to be a mix. It really is going to be a split country where about half of the country lives in states where abortion is banned or almost impossible to get. And then the other half live in states where abortion is legal and protected, and in some of those, very accessible, and with support from the government.
So people can look at the maps on their screen right now, figure out where they live and what this might mean for them, and still come out of this very confused. And Melody, I just, started this show by saying that some states actually have a constitutional right written into their state constitution. But even that is not going to necessarily mean someone who wants to get an abortion in one of those states can. Is that correct?
That's right. I mean, the laws are really confusing. Some states have zombie laws that were on the books before Roe. Some have passed trigger laws that will go into effect, as you mentioned, as soon as Roe is overturned, if it is. It's really confusing. The different states have different restrictions. Some are trying to prohibit it entirely in all cases. Some just have gestational limits. it seems like it's going to be quite a mess figuring out just what exactly your state offers, and that could limit someone who could get a legal abortion, might not even know that it is legal where they are. So I think it's going to be very confusing.
So even though we put up these handy dandy maps tonight, the green ones are a go. They're still, okay, and the red ones are kind of a no-go zone, but varying gradations. David, the notion that women who want the right to an abortion right now and live in one of the red states, the restricted states, some of them may have thought right away, well, then I can just, if I have the means, the money, I can get in a car or a plane and I can fly somewhere, and I can still get that right in a state that allows it. But a lot of those red states are saying, not so fast. And here's where I don't understand how this works. If a state, let's just say Texas, for instance, is going to tell its citizens, you may not travel to any other state to get an abortion, how can you enforce that? Because the last I checked, our constitutional allows freedom, freedom of movement, freedom of speech, freedom of travel. You can't chain someone to a state just because she's pregnant. But is there a gray area I'm not seeing?
I think your understanding of things, that's my understanding of things. And I would like that to be how the Constitution understood things. But unfortunately, the constitutional doctrine around this is unclear, because we simply haven't had many examples of states trying to exercise their powers outside their borders or to stop travel. But I think we're going to see that. And when we see that, the challenges are going to go to the federal courts and the Supreme Court that is very anti-abortion. And I think they may have a very different understanding of the constitutional right to travel and what it means to live in a country of 50 different states with 50 different laws than it sounds like you and I have. And that's the trouble. We've already seen, for instance, Missouri, a legislator in Missouri introduce a bill that would make it against the law to aid or abet someone traveling outside the state of Missouri to get an abortion in another state. And you started the question by saying, well, how are they going to know? A lot of people, they might never know. But someone whose boyfriend is upset that they were pregnant and now they're not pregnant may tell the police or may try to bring a lawsuit, or a family member who's upset.
On top of that, David, Texas and Oklahoma also have bills right now that say anybody who plays any part at all, even guidance or talking or driving or Uber or anything like that, can be sued. So that there are these other kinds of laws that are restrictive. But just let me follow up on that, if you could just give me a second, on the notion that I can leave my state if gambling's not allowed here. And I can go gamble in another state, and I am behaving in a legal way under the jurisdiction of that state. Law is all about jurisdiction, who has it, who doesn't. And I don't understand how this can change. But, I mean, is there an actual way? Have you seen it happen before?
So we've seen states try it before. It happened in my state in the 1990s, where a mom was prosecuted for bringing her son's girlfriend across state lines for getting an abortion. Basically, states are going to say that the crime that occurred in another state has effects in our state because you've eliminated a citizen of our state, the fetus, or the crime started in our state because the travel started in our state. They're going to try these theories, and all it takes is an overzealous local prosecutor to try to do this, and it will be very chilling to people who are trying to travel.
You can try anything. Yeah, you can try anything. Melody, one last question about this, and that is that, during COVID, abortion pills became so much more popular. I mean, it really became a new movement. And so that seems to be almost the norm now. But I'm curious, under these new restrictive, states, are you allowed to ship state to state? Can they pass laws to say you can't ship a pill over state lines? Will people who live in restrictive states be able to get those pills, or will it be contraband?
These are all great questions. Last year, Texas passed a law saying that you could not ship across state lines. There are sometimes restrictions on providers being able to ship to see patients via telehealth. But there are still international organizations that can ship internationally. It's not a state law question when it's international. As you said, a majority of pregnancies are terminated via medication abortion in the U.S. now, but it can only be used up to 10 weeks. And so, that's not the answer for everyone. It also means that some people are going to be limited if they don't have access to a computer, if they don't know that this exists, if they don't know how to get it, if they don't know the right international organization to contact. It's an answer for some people, but it's certainly not going to help everyone.
I think the bottom line here is that even any answers we have tonight will be entirely different, possibly by the summer. So it behooves women and men to do their own research in each state to figure out a workaround if that's what they're looking for. David Cohen, Melody Schreiber, thank you so much. Appreciate your time tonight. Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.